技术，跟着 Jess 毁三观，跟着鸟鸟在发育，婊子们的性生活，
表酱。
大家好，欢迎收听表酱，我是 Jess。 荷兰这边天气是越来越冷了，白天也越来越短，不知道大家的床还暖不暖呢？我在这边就比较苦逼了，天天工作写论文，室外活动也比较少。总之呢，是一个比较容易郁闷的季节，希望大家多多补充维他命 D， 多出门走一走，有阳光的时候呢，多晒一晒太阳。今天的节目里，我们请来了去年的年度性工作者获奖者 Seani Love。 他是一名男性性工作者，擅长挖掘人性的黑暗之处，并创造相对安全的环境把它释放出来。比如说，很多人可能有恐吓、敲诈甚至强奸他人的想法，但当然了，除非你想进监狱，否则一般都不会去实施。所以跟某个人建立起一定的信任，在性爱中上演这样的情节，就是很好的探索方式。而在这个过程中，说不定也有一些治愈和顿悟呢，这也就是他所谓的 conscious kink， 我姑且就翻译为带着觉知去变态吧。比如在我们共同参加的一次工作坊中，有人就设想了这样一种性骚扰的场景。它不是我们通常在新闻里看到的那种男上司骚扰女下属，而是女下属威胁男上司跟他做爱，否则就要告他性骚扰。我觉得这个场景非常耐人寻味，也有些政治不正确的意思。因为我们常常一提到性骚扰，就是男人对女人，上级对下级，以工作为威胁，逼人就范。但与此同时，在舆论越来越偏向于相信所谓的被害人，哪怕证据不那么充分的时候，其实这种反过来的威胁也是很有可能成立的。但如果在现实生活中被讨论呢，则有很可能会被说成不相信，甚至诬告受害者，或者简单的被打成直男癌啊，或者不够女权的标签。所以在那次活动中，我们就把这样的场景演绎出来了，也是一次很有趣的经历。我们也聊到，如果真的去玩强奸或者敲诈的角色扮演，那么在游戏中如何确认说对方是否真的同意呢？因为这种事情玩不好，就很可能真的被告成强奸。但是如果时不时太温柔的去跟人征求同意，又失去了被动一方偏偏就是想被物化、被剥夺自主权的那种快感和乐趣。所以这个里面其实是很微妙的，需要一些技巧和高度的信任和理解才能实现。我们也聊到这些带引号的变态的行为其实是可以很治愈的呢。也有听友告诉我说，他们不太喜欢太粗野、只虐不走心的那种 SM。那么我们这一期介绍的这种变态和修心两不误的，应该就是比较对胃口的吧。但我其实也并不排斥简单粗暴的 SM， 因为走心有时候还是比较费力的。不过不管是哪一种偏好，我相信有的听众会跟我一样，对于宇宙啊、神啊、灵性啊这些词汇不是特别的有感，但是呢又一直相信，不管是用什么样的宗教的或是非宗教的语言，用性或者非性的方式，每个人都可以通过内观，通过觉察自己的内心，找到一点点的宁静和顿悟，也算是条条大路通罗马吧。这一期我的开头比较鸡汤，因为接下来的节目是英文的那大叔的声音还是蛮有磁性的，我们一起来听听吧。
Hi everyone, I'm Seani Love. I'm from Australia. I'm from Sydney in Australia, but now I live in London. And it's nice to be here in your studio, Jessie. Very pleasant to be here. And I'm looking forward to having a great conversation about beach sauce.
Yeah, this is our Chinese podcast, which is sex positive, and we talk a lot about Tantra as well. Let's talk a little bit about how we met each other. Yeah? I knew Seani from a workshop or a hands-on festival, actually, that's called.
Yeah, the Hands-On Festival in Utrecht in the Netherlands. It's a gathering of 10 teachers and 80 participants with a whole lot of different workshops around the theme of conscious sexuality, bring more consciousness into sexuality and playfulness, both light and dark, playful and sexy. It was a very beautiful weekend.
Yeah, actually, in the previous podcast, I have talked about the orgy you organized in that festival, which was really wonderful. Yeah, I talked about the 4 sections of that room and introduced.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so that was organized by Seani and a friend of his, Grace, right?
Yes. Yeah, I really enjoyed doing that workshop, and the 4 sections is really to help people feel really safe.
Yeah.
So people can stay off and no one's going to touch them, or people can venture in, getting deeper and deeper with more interaction, more physical contact, more sexual sharing. So yeah, the structure is really important to help people feel safe, which is the main theme. Conscious sexuality is helping people feel really safe before they touching each other.
Yeah, I had a great time there.
I remember.
Yeah. And there was another workshop called Conscious Kink, right?
Conscious Kink, yes.
That was good too. Yeah, can you introduce to our audience a little bit about those? What's consciousness? What's kink?
It's a good question. So there's many different ways to have sex and many different ways to engage sexually. There's so much more than just... Most people think of sex as putting a penis inside a vagina.
Yeah.
But this is just a very limited view. There's so much more to it. So, for example, kinks is a way to explore outside the normal realms of sexuality. For example, you might want to explore power dynamics, where one person serves another person for a little while. Or you might want to learn different ways to engage with your body. For example, maybe you like to be scratched a little bit. And even scratching is a beautiful art form, scratching, or some people like to bite their lovers or be bitten by their lovers. This can be really beautiful if it's done safely. So the idea is kink is to explore different ways to have sex. And of course, conscious kink is how we can explore this aspect of sexuality really consciously, really safely, make sure there's lots of consent, make sure everyone's agreement with each other.
Yeah.
But also, it works the other way around as well, because kink and sexuality can be ways to explore our own consciousness and learn more about ourselves, and I think that's really beautiful as well.
Yeah, because I was like, a lot of people were thinking, I'm having sex, why would I bother thinking that much? Or some people are like, I'm doing spiritual stuff, why would I think about these dark sexual things? So how do you put them together?
Yeah, I think there's so much more to human sexuality than people realize. There's so much more possibility and potential. It's like a massive thing we can do. So if you think sex is just one person rubbing another person in a certain way, this is really limited, and there's so much more you can do, so much more you can learn about your own body, every part of your body can be really erogenous and really sexy. The way you breathe can change the way you have sex. The way you talk, even changing your accent when you make love can really bring in a whole different part of sexuality. And, sexuality is part of life. It's how we came into the world, and it's what compels us all the way through our lives. And it's our whole life, so of course it's a very spiritual thing. To learn to engage with our sexuality in a spiritual way means we become whole beings, we become really powerful, we get to know ourselves really well. There should not be a separation. I think some religions try to separate spirituality from sexuality, but I think this is really destructive. These things are really close together. It's like your spirit lives inside your body. And so the spirit and the body coming together, the spirit and the flesh coming together, is where we become really beautiful and really powerful, and how we become strong, powerful creatures.
I think luckily many Chinese people don't have that idea of separating spirituality and sexuality. Like in Taoism and Buddhism, people just don't have this mentality, which is quite nice, I think.
That sounds really nice.
Yeah.
I think in Western religions, there's been a real separation, especially some of the churches talking about sex being a sin, or what the body wants to do, such as masturbation or orgasm. Some people call this a sin, and they believe that their God doesn't like this kind of stuff. And that's really unfortunate, because there's nothing more beautiful than interacting spiritually with sexuality.
Yeah, and previously you talked about a shadow in your body or in your mind that sometimes you want to hide or you want to deny. So tell me more about it.
Sure. So the idea of shadow comes from a psychologist called Carl Jung, and hopefully you can put a link in the comments. Okay. He talks a lot about the shadow, the human shadow, and it's like people hiding parts of their own sexuality from themselves or from their communities around them, from their families. A really good example would be something like homosexuality, which is illegal in lots of the world, and people who are homosexual need to hide that in order to stay safe. So that's part of their sexuality gets pushed into the shadows and denied. But of course, it's still part of them, so it comes out in destructive ways. So for example, in America, there's a lot of priests who are homosexual, but they're talking about how much they hate homosexual people, but they're often caught with homosexual porn or homosexual prostitutes and stuff, because this is part of their shadow coming out in destructive ways. So the idea of integrating the shadows, where we don't suppress things inside ourselves, we don't force other people to suppress things inside themselves, but we really integrate all of ourselves. So if I'm homosexual, I try as much as possible to live with this as my truth. And I know there's homosexuals perfectly natural in the world, so I don't judge other people for being that, and just everyone can live their truth. Everyone can be really true to their own sexuality, and we call this integrating the shadow.
Yeah, that's beautiful. But on the other hand, that's also a little bit scary for a lot of people, because they will say, okay, this will make me so vulnerable, and it exposes the shadowy part I might not want to admit or something. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I agree. It is very it puts us in a vulnerable position, puts us in a vulnerable place, and the idea is to create safe spaces in which people can explore their shadow safely, which is why I run the workshops I do. We have the shadow, we have part of our sexuality suppressed, and in the workshops I run around the world, find nice ways in which people can access this part of themselves. They're not going to be judged, and they can learn what that actually feels like, not in the shadows, but taking a light inside themselves and shining a light on themselves. It's very light, it's very beautiful. So there's shadows there already. We're taking a light inside ourselves and lighting it up to become more beautiful. But this has to be done in a safe environment.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe that still sounds a little bit abstract for our audience. Maybe can you give a concrete example of how, for example, you bring the shadow parts of maybe yourself or some of your clients into light, and how do you integrate those?
Sure.
Yeah.
I remember at Hands-On Festival, during my Conscious Kink workshop, there were many people there, including 2 women in particular, and during this workshop they admitted that they had some lesbian fantasies, some lesbian desires, but they had never found a safe place to explore this. But there was 2 people that hadn't met each other, expressed the same idea during this workshop. So sort of after they both said that their eyes made contact, and they got a little bit of flirt inside themselves, a bit flirtatious, and when there was time to find a partner, they found each other. And it was very beautiful to see 2 people exploring some part of themselves. They admitted it, they made themselves vulnerable in the group, and then they found each other, and they played some very beautiful scenes together. And it was very beautiful to see them owning this part of themselves for the first time in their life. And it was so beautiful and so tender to witness that, and to be able to create spaces like that is such a dream, such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think that, to a large extent, that owes to this safe space and the very relaxing environment you created.
Yeah, safe space is so very important for this. I think I have some skills with counselling, with therapy work. And I think a therapist creates a really safe space in which a person can talk about whatever challenges there are. So that technique is the same in workshops, providing a safe space in which people can be vulnerable, can share, and can explore themselves. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, that reminds me that actually in that conscious kink workshop, I was like for the first time exploring my bottom part, because I was more like a topish person before, and then in that workshop you said, okay, you have to switch, and yeah, that was a wonderful experience as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important to switch in workshops and to switch to learn more about yourself.
Really, because before I didn't think much about like switching experience, because I know a lot of like 100% quote unquote top and bottom, they may not feel comfortable to switch. Have you encountered these kind of cases?
Yeah, so I'm 95% top, but I always like to try switch just to get a feel for what it is like. Maybe it doesn't turn me on erotically, or maybe it scares me a little bit, but it's still nice to get a sense of where the direction is, so I know where I'm taking where I'm taking my partners. So I like to be the boss usually. I like to be the dominant person. But every now and then I submit just a little bit, just to get a feel for what that's like, and let my body feel it, and let my mind surrender just a little bit. And then when I come back to being a top again, I sort of know the direction I'm taking the submissive partner into. Yeah,
nice. Has someone ever like refused to switch in your workshops?
People sometimes. No, people don't refuse to switch, but sometimes they don't go very far into it, and that's okay. Even if they just
as long as they're comfortable with their boundaries.
Yeah, I think it's really important. If someone just switches just a tiny little bit, even if they don't do anything there, that everyone has to respect their own boundaries. And even going there just a tiny bit for the first time can be really powerful for people. People can learn a lot about themselves.
Just filled another cup of water. Okay. Talking about boundaries. We were in another workshop called Consensual Non-Consent, which is also a very inspiring idea to me at that time. Yeah.
Consensual non-consent is really common fantasy. To give some theory first. Consent is the most important thing with all sexuality. Before I do anything to you, I want to make sure that you're saying yes to it, and hopefully enthusiastically, or at least experimentally saying yes to it. So if I say, can I touch your leg? If you say no, I'm not going to do it. But a lot of people have a fantasy where their consent is taken away from them. So some people fantasize about being overpowered, or being made to do certain things, or
and even raped.
People fantasize about being raped, or about raping other people, and nobody really wants to ever be raped. Of course, no one ever wants this, and no ethical person would ever rape somebody else. But this concept of consensual non-consent is a way to role play around this area, where for a time you hand power over to someone else so you can explore what rape is like. But it's done very safely, very gently, with lots of communication and consent and boundaries. And for a time you're going to hand your power over to somebody else and feel what it's like to be overpowered.
It's quite a skillful thing, because you want that sense of non-consent, but also you want to make sure that both of you are consensual, which is a very technical thing.
Yeah, it sounds very technical, but once you learn the techniques, it's quite very easy to try this, very easy to do this. And it involves lots of checking in, lots of communication. We have safe words that we use, and we have real access to those, so you can say stop, or red, or orange whenever you need to. And we have lots of ways to check in every step of the way. And once you've got that sort of safety, that structure, you can go really deep with this work, and you can really overpower people and explore what it's like to experience rape.
Can you again give us some examples? For example, sometimes people just don't feel like being asked yes or no. verbally. Can you give us some example of how to ask consent without saying yes or no? And
we have this difference between being inside the scene and outside the scene. Inside the scene is where the rape is happening, and I'm overpowering you and doing things to you. And outside the scene is where we're talking about it. So we want to be able to step in and out a bit fluidly while we're communicating about it. And inside the scene, if you say no or stop, I'm going to ignore you and keep going. But if we step outside the scene and you say, this is not working, you're pulling my hair too hard, I need a glass of water, change the music or something, and we can talk about stuff like that outside, and then we step inside the scene again, and then I start to ignore what you say. And we need to find ways that we can step in and out fluidly. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But what's the boundary between in and out then?
So there's different ways to do it. A really common way to do it is with traffic lights. Like green means go, orange means we're going to stop and just check in briefly, red means we need to stop the scene some way. So if I'm overpowering you inside a scene and something's not working, like you need to take your socks off or something, then I'm without losing the energy of the scene, so I'm still holding you, and you'll say orange, I'll keep holding you in that aggressive way, and I'll say, what's wrong? And you'll say, I need to take my socks off. And I'll say, okay, take your socks off.
And you can still say that like aggressively, or you still keep that vibe in the scene.
You can still keep it in the scene, yeah. So we'll have a distinction between orange and red. So when we say orange, I'm still holding you, but I'm checking in to see what's wrong. Okay. And you might say, you're holding my throat too hard, or my socks are the wrong colour, or I need to clean my teeth, or whatever's going on there. So we find ways to communicate that. It's a little bit technical.
Yeah.
It's not technical, but it takes practice.
Yeah.
It takes practice. And it's really important to practice this quite a lot. A lot of people get healing from exploring consensual non-consent, especially in my private work. Some people have had trauma where they've really had their consent taken away from them. And this is really horrible, really tragic. But when the consent was taken away, maybe something happened to their body, it was invaded or intruded, or something happened that they didn't wish to happen. So by having good communication and creating a really safe space, we can go back to that place by doing reenactment. We can do some kind of reenactment of what happened to that person. And by doing that reenactment, we can touch on that pain that happened inside them when the consent was taken away. And by touching on that pain, and that person can say orange or red whenever they need to, then they can touch on that pain and release a lot of their pain. And that's really beautiful to do for people.
Wow.
Yeah. So if a trauma happened to a client and we revisit that place, maybe the trauma happened and whenever she's with a lover now, her body gets frozen and she gets all cold and freezes up.
Yeah.
But by doing this in a really safe and conscious way, when we get to that point where the body freezes, we can say orange and we can slowly, gently thaw her out so that anything that was frozen starts to thaw and she can start to enjoy her body again. It's very emotional as well. A lot of tears can be released, and so you really have to know how to hold space for somebody. But it's really beautiful work. So it can be really good fun or really healing or somewhere in between. And always in the workshops, emotion is welcome, because emotion is the gateway to erotic healing and empowerment.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's a pity that in that workshop I dropped because I fell and I bumped my head. But I was curious what happened then, because there were a few sessions in that workshop, right? And the first one was more like you created a non-consensual saying of... You demonstrated something like piracy, or can you talk a little bit about what happened later? I'm quite curious.
Yeah. So we have different techniques of how to take away someone's consent, and piracy is like, it's a fun game where you role play that one person is a pirate and the other person knows where the treasure is hidden. So you go, where's the treasure? And it's fun to put on a pirate voice. And it becomes really playful and really light. Yeah. Sadly, he had an accident, and I'm so sorry about that. But another thing is so this is like interrogation scene.
Okay.
And pirate interrogation is probably the most fun. But other ways to take away someone's consent is through fantasizing about blackmail.
Yeah, people talk about that. That was quite dark. Like
it can be very dark.
Yeah, threatening to, for example, accuse you for sexual harassment if you don't have sex with me. Like those kind of things. I was like, oh yeah, that's so dark, but that's so real because that can happen in daily life.
Yeah, it can happen in real life. It's horrible when it really happens.
Yeah.
But here's a way to play with it erotically. And you can always say orange or red to step out whenever you want. So yeah, if you don't have sex with me, I'm going to tell everyone that you had sex with me. Because you're laughing now. So it can be really light and really fun as play partners. But no one really wants this to happen. Other examples are, if you're if you've ever seen pornography, you've probably seen schoolgirls getting spanked. Maybe that's very common, I think, especially in Japan and England.
Yeah.
Maybe other places, maybe China as well, Holland, I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, everywhere. So it's like, you're a very naughty girl. I saw you smoking in the school grounds, and now I have to call your mummy.
Oh, that's a typical porn scene.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm blackmailing you.
Yeah.
I'm going to call your mummy unless you give me a kiss. Yeah. So this is another one. Or like, I hacked into your phone and I know you're having an affair with my friend. And if you don't do what I say, I'm going to tell your husband that you're having an affair. And then for the duration of the scene, you have to do everything I say. But if I say to do something you don't like, you can say orange or red or something you need to say. Yeah. So
yeah, it's really fun. Yeah. And as long as both the people like devote into it and really
you have to commit to the scene. Yeah.
And those things, I think. What do you think is the significance of acting out those very dark things we don't want to see in our daily life? Because in another workshop, I'm not sure if you were there, they were talking about, for example, slut shaming, writing slut on your body, and then as part of the BDSM thing. And yeah, I don't know, what's your opinion about it?
In my opinion, so much of our sexuality is repressed, and there's so much to learn. And every time we see someone that we want to have sex with, often we'll create imaginary scenes in our world, how that sex happened, or what happened, or how we orchestrated to be in that position where we were having sex with them. And role play is just a powerful way to help us get to those places. It can be really a powerful tool to bring more energy or more eroticness to our sexual fantasies, to our sex lives. So when we're playing with some of our darker fantasies, we're touching on stuff that's quite powerful and quite charged inside ourselves. And some people have a lot of fun doing this, and some people don't even want to look at that sort of stuff. And some people say they never have darker fantasies at all, and I'm not sure if that's true. But some people shouldn't. I think some people should best not if they. I think it's best if some people don't explore their own shadows yet, because they need to learn more about consent and boundaries and engaging with people erotically, or their shadows are just so big that they can't really look at it. But this kind of workshop is a way to start to look at it, and so, it can be really good fun. It can be very beautiful and really good fun, and as I say, it can be really healing as well.
What would you do if people couldn't handle that much emotion in one workshop, and then do you offer a little bit of aftercare or some advice to them?
Yeah, because we're touching on sometimes really dark stuff inside people, and if we're touching on dark stuff and a lot of emotion comes up, I would really encourage those people who get triggered to seek professional help.
Yeah,
it means there's something inside themselves that needs to be dealt with. Maybe they should see a counsellor or a therapist or someone who can help them work through that. I offer those sessions myself. where we can act it out and go really into those places where a lot of emotion gets released. And I do that privately, hands-on, one-on-one in my private work as well. I really encourage anyone who gets triggered in that way to find ways to work through it so that they can release that pain from their bodies and become more powerful inside themselves. It's very important to do that.
Yeah, indeed. That's very important. Do you have any other things you want to share to our audience in China?
I was in China once before, a few years ago, before I became a sexuality professional, before I was a sex worker.
Oh, by the way, where were you at that time?
I was in Shanghai. I was a software engineer, and I came for 2 weeks to work as a software engineer, and I really loved it. Very beautiful people, very welcoming, and yeah, I had a really good time there. And I would love to come back. I'd love to come back and meet you all. I don't know who's listening, but I want to come and meet you all. So if there's a chance to come, and I don't know, people that are interested in workshops and stuff, but I would love to come and share some of this with China. I'll obey all the laws, of course. And I think both light and dark aspects of sexuality both lead towards empowerment, leads towards knowing more about ourselves. So I think it's really beautiful that we engage with that. You know, I encourage people out there to find safe ways to explore their sexuality with their friends, with their lovers, and their husbands and wives. And I hope everyone in there has a really beautiful, sexy, powerful time. Thank you for inviting me onto your show.
Oh, thank you very much for joining us. Yeah.
I hope that's been interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.